garden being what it is, and really want a little kind of a nod and sort of just a kind of a congratulations to this crew. It was a lot of our garden crew is here. Ian and Yuli, Catherine, they do a great job out there. Well, we got Noni over here too. Noni, I'm sorry. Any other gardeners I've missed, rudely missed? So just look at the pines out there right now. They're really looking phenomenal. So I'm really grateful for all that work and the power that these gardens have as we learn more and more about the impact that a Japanese garden can have, and especially one that really works well and is maintained well. But just we have a great lecture series. The rest of the lecture series is awesome. We have it's one really great presentation after another. And next month is going to be a presentation by a tea teacher, lives in Chicago now, but he trained in Japan for a year at the Midori Kai, which is the Urasenke, back to the 16th century school, unbroken lineage. So he's here. He's going to talk about what a full tea event would be. And so tea is kind of a mysterious thing, and so I'm really excited to have him here. Omar Francis Sensei will be here, but a lot of great things going on out in the garden. But tonight we have Greg Afman here. Known Greg for many years now, and what a marvelously trained guy with just a great disposition and a pleasure to be around and be with. And it's great for our crew. We're like on a little island here in a sense, and it's great to have someone with really a great set of skills come in and help us develop even further. Greg grew up in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Lived in Japan for 10 years, training under a couple bonsai masters and some really fine garden builders, including Mitsuhashi Sensei, who impacted me greatly. I spent a week with him building a little garden in Portland as part of the Training Institute's inaugural seminar out there. But Greg worked with Mitsuhashi Sensei for a year, came back to the States and went to work at the Meyer Japanese Garden. Actually, before it was really a garden, it was under construction. So Greg worked with Hoichi on that garden for 2 years. 2 years, and then followed that up with moved back to Japan for about a year, and then came back to work with Hoichi full time about 6 years ago. So he does great work all over the country, and really great to have Greg here, a good friend, and it's just a pleasure. So please give a welcome to Greg Afman.
So, I'll just get started. Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and like Tim said, I have the pleasure to come here about every year. I get to stay here for about 2 weeks and work in the garden, work with the wonderful crew here, and it's just a pleasure. And it's always a struggle. I have to leave tomorrow, first thing in the morning, but I don't want to go, so we'll see. I might keep talking all night, so I miss my plan. We'll see. So, tonight's topic is, as you can see, creating space to connect, pruning in Japanese gardens. I had to have a title, right? Tim said you need to talk about something. But the reality is, what I would really like to do is give everyone one of these, and we go out into the garden. And we don't say a word. And I don't say a thing about anything. All you hear is that clicking. Right? Now, you're thinking, okay, that sounds great and everything, but well, Tim said I couldn't do that. The second is that in Japan, I learned, basically, you learn through the body first, and then through the mind, right? So that was how I was trained. I started with bonsai when I first moved to Japan. And if I asked a question, it was just looked like, my sensei would just look at me like, what, are you stupid? Why are you asking a question? Just watch, just do it. So you do the same thing over and over and over until your body learns it, right? So why do you think that is? Any guess? Because it is quite kind of opposite of what we're used to, right? If you don't know something now, we Google it, and you understand it. And you think. But does your body know it then? Here's kind of one example, and it came to me in the garden yesterday. I think we were talking, and I realized everyone that was asking the docents for directions because they were lost, they're like, excuse me, where's this? How do I find this? Everyone that was lost and asking for directions, guess what they had in common? A map. They all had a map in their hand, and they were all lost. Every person without a map, they knew exactly where they were going. Think about that for a bit. So, unfortunately, we're stuck inside, not in the garden. So, I will do my best to kind of explain two underlying principles that kind of guide pruning in a Japanese garden. Okay? And if you have any questions along the way, please shout it out. Does this look familiar to anyone? Ryoanji, yes, yeah. Famous kare sensui, or dry garden that's located in Kyoto. But we're not interested in this. Have you ever wondered, who's been here? Anyone? Good, got you. Have you ever wondered, if you haven't been here, what's on the other side of the building? Well, the first time I visited this space, of course, I was drawn to the rock formations, in the front. That's very famous. It's kind of like Mona Lisa in a sense, right? You have this image of it, and then you see it. It is very, very powerful. But I found myself wandering around the veranda to the back side of the building, and I heard this sound, and I came to this tsukubai, or water basin, and it was just kind of tucked away, and all the tourists were in the front of the building, and no one was here. And I'm like, I have the place to myself. And I just couldn't believe on the other side of the building was all this hectic activity. And basically tonight, we're gonna be using this tsukubai, or actually kind of the kanji that's written on it. You can kind of barely see the kanji that's written on it as our guide for tonight. In a sense, kind of like our Rosetta Stone, right? Making sense of the pruning principles I'll be talking about. So, the name of that water basin, or tsukubai, is called zenibachi. That's just the name given to it. Does this look familiar? Yeah, I hope so, right? So it's kind of the insignia of Anderson Gardens. It's on the sticker, it's on the pass. So I wanted, again, to use something very familiar to you, but kind of maybe see it in a different light than you're used to seeing it in. So, we have the kanji, right? And it's going to be our guide for our first kind of underlying principle for tonight. Now, this is kind of a mystery because if you can read kanji or Japanese, this really doesn't make any sense if you first look at it. Or, I'm not Japanese, but that's what I've been told. So for example, some of these kanji do make sense by themselves. So this could mean 5. That could just mean the number 5, and I think one of these could be a type of bird. But you get to this one, and it makes no sense. It's basically like me writing the letter Z on there. So when you look at it, you're like, wait, something's wrong, or I'm missing something. What am I missing? Here's the key. To to make this make sense, you have to know how to read it. It's like a puzzle. So the first kind of puzzle is everything is related to this center square. That is actually a kanji. So that is, or you could say a letter. So you have to combine the top with this to make a word. So that becomes ware. So that becomes ware. And then now it's like, oh, I think I get it. So then you connect this kanji, which is kuchi, or mouth, with this, and that's tada. So ware, tada, and then same here, you go back to the center, connect this with that, ware, tada, taru, and then here, you go from here to there, so the order changes a little bit. You have to know enough of your alphabet or kanji to read it, and that's shiru. So basically, the meaning, if you translate it, is I'm content with what I have. That's kind of my translation. There's many different ways to do it. But now you're asking yourself, what does this have to do with pruning? Right? What it does is you have to know how to read it for it to make sense, right? And you have to know the flow. So we have this kind of directional flow, then it goes over, down, and then back. So same when it comes to our first concept. It's called kisei. That's what I'll talk about first. It has to do with the flow of something. So let's just read it. Ki in Japanese is literally air or breath. It is often described as spiritual energy. Sei is force or tendency. In the garden, kisei refers to an object's inherent qualities and signifies the flow of energy, right? So just a quick example, every object has a motion or a kisei to it, right? If I'm standing straight up, it's pretty vertical, up and down, right? But if I'm, hopefully when I'm about 90 years old, I'll be this direction. My kisei is more horizontal, flowing. And some examples, so you have a tree, right? The energy is up and down. A stone could be up or down. And then you can combine them and, for example, create that effect. Or here, the directional flow is kind of a sweeping pattern or moving across. And that could be combined to complement each other, right? But it doesn't stop there, right? You could have contradicting kind of kisei or flows that would create some kind of tension. And normally in a Japanese garden, we don't want that, right? We kind of want things to go together. So for example, here, this stone, right? Which direction is its kisei? Yes. Yes, good. Yep. So it can shift by how you arrange things. So it's very important when making a Japanese garden to really figure out which way the objects are leaning, or we'll get to it later, which way they are pruned. So that really affects kisei. I got this drawing off of Hoichi's table when he wasn't looking, so don't tell him. But Hoichi, as Tim mentioned, so I currently work for Hoichi Kurisu, who is the garden designer of Anderson Gardens. And he just has this amazing ability to go into a space and really kind of right away determine what flow or kisei he wants in that space. And then he'll quick sketch it up. And I mean, in 30 minutes time, he can come up with something like this. It's just incredible to watch. But here, which way do you think the kisei is? Yeah, exactly. Now, why?
Path.
Path, good. Anything else? The path? The water? Very good. Yeah. So you can think of Kisei as this kind of just strong energy that every landscape has. If you're, for example, I went kayaking this week and we were rolling or floating down the river. And can you imagine what those trees were doing by the side of the river? Yeah? Following the river, yeah. Following the river, leaning over, they're looking for light. So that movement is just like carrying you on. It would be very awkward to kind of be kayaking down a river and all the trees would be a different direction, right? So everything looks to nature for a reference in a Japanese garden. I wanted to kind of show you a few things that the gardeners and I have been working on this week, and sorry, you have to forgive my photos. I know there's some good photographers in this audience, so be gentle. But when you look at this, there's something I wanted to emphasize that wasn't kind of happening yet in this scene. But the way a pruner, I guess, you approach a scene is before you even begin pruning a tree, you have to think of the kisei, right? What's happening here? What should be happening here? How can I maximize the kisei? So looking at this, and are you familiar with this kind of location, some of you? Or if you're not, even maybe guess, which way do you think the plants should be flowing? Yeah, exactly, right? This is downstream. You've got a nice bend. Everything should be kind of moving this way. So this, I know it's hard to see, but this is kind of, it's doing its thing. It's leading out over the water, pointing in the right direction. So we were focusing on pines, and we really wanted to emphasize kind of that flow. But right now, those two pines are pretty rigid, and they're quite vertical, they're kisei. So over time, we are going to thin them out and then develop the lower pads. So like the lower pads of the tree, and start bringing those out over the water, like you would see if you were kayaking down the river. And that basically entails, by allowing this to grow out, we focus the kind of the kisei energy, and then the backside, we kind of do a lot of reduction cuts, or reduce the size, so that energy really seems to flow. I did take an after shot, but again, it's super hard to see because when we work on a pine this time of year too, we are also candling, which means basically candling and thinning it out. So, of course, it's harder to see because it's very thinned out, but it's a good excuse to come back to the garden in a few weeks and you'll see it fuller. But I think you can kind of grasp what's going on. There's the trunk here, and then we cut the backside out, so now it has more of a form over the water, and then the lower branch is going here, and we'll just keep extending that over time, over the water. All right, now the fun part. So, before I talk about kisei, maybe one kind of interesting note would be about kind of what the gardeners have been doing the last couple weeks, and probably continue for another couple weeks with regards to pines. Pines, they require a lot of care, as you know, and it's one of my favorite trees to work with. But kind of how, or what work we do, I'll give you a little preview here, a little show. So these are the candles, right? The new growth. And what we really want to do with pines is to create nice movement. We kind of find a nice line within the branches and then we kind of let that grow. And anything that's growing straight up or straight down, we remove. Just keeping that nice line, that nice movement. And also, we try to do things to twos. So for example, if we start with one large branch, then we'll let it split to two. And then you can see this one, then that one again splits to two. And then again goes to two. That's called kind of ramification. This idea of getting from coarse to thin or finer. From this should be the coarsest part, of the branch, and as you work your way out, this should be the thinnest. So we're trying to continue that look. So we are thinning out, but we're also candling. So these are the candles, and as you can see, this one has 3 candles. So if I let that grow, it would be too dense, and it wouldn't visually be appealing. So what we do is, this time of year is perfect. They're tender enough where you just take your hand and you pull it out. So then I'm left with 2, and then I can walk away or jump out of the tree, either way. But other times, for example, this one has 2, you can see it has 2 candles, but it's maybe too long. So this, what's gonna happen in a few weeks' time is all these kind of silver that you see are gonna be needles, right? They're all gonna just open up and become needles in a few weeks. So if I don't do anything, that's how much it's gonna grow for this whole year. Then it's done growing for the most part. But maybe it's too long. Sometimes these candles can be a foot long, right? Yeah, I know, tell me about it. So, this isn't bad, but what I can do, again, I can just break it. And I've reduced the growth by half for this year. And we typically break it by hand instead of doing this. Why? Why? Good question. Why? You seem to know. No? Okay. Anyone? Why? Why would we do that?
Isn't it,
Pinch off the.
I mean, you're basically not cutting through a whole bunch of tissue, you're just snapping off that little piece of branch.
Yeah.
So what the remnant you're leaving behind doesn't have damaged portions of it.
There you go, there you go. Yeah, afterwards you can come up and take a look if you're interested, but for example, one I cut, I know you won't be able to see it now, but this one I cut, and I'm cutting through needles before they expose. So once they grow up, they're gonna have brown tips, and it'll look unsightly. This one, do you see how I have needles at the top? So it's not damaging any of the remaining needles. So you can't even tell we pinched it. So again, kind of covering your tracks in a way. So again, just to kind of talk again about kisei, right? So when you make the Japanese garden, the first thing we pretty much do is put the boulders in. So imagine this boulder was placed here. We know the kisei is going that way. Now, it's my turn to plant the tree. It's like a Charlie Brown Christmas tree. So here's my tree. Look how it really changes. I think we need a better looking tree. And another kind of hint about pruning. Do you see how this is on the inside of a curve right here, this branch? See how weird that looks? And like, just kind of doesn't feel right. You get rid of it, and it feels better. And then this one technically is going down, so I'll get rid of that. And that just makes, if you can imagine this was a tree, it would look better. But So here's my tree, here's my kisei, right? Now, when you plant, you have to think, how are they relating? So in this case, that might look nice to have something growing over the boulder like that. If I did this, it would have a completely different story. In fact, there would be no story because there's no conversation, right? Everything you want things talking to each other. They have to relate somehow. Any questions so far? All right. So, that was our first one. So what was our first concept?
Kisei.
Kisei, okay. Next one is, any guess? No? You are right. If you said nothing, you are correct. Our next concept is ma. So, ma. Ma may be defined as active emptiness or void. Physical, social, or related to time. Ma is an interval that, rather than separating elements, connects them and emerges as a focal point itself. Whew, I need to sit down. Who had a drink tonight? Because this one, it takes a little while to get through the head. So, what's worth repeating? Rather than separating elements, it connects them and emerges as a focal point. That's kind of the key of Ma right there. Now, we'll get to it. Looking at these stones. All right, our first concept?
Kisei.
Kisei. Which way? That's right. So everything is moving, right? This kisei. Now, ma, what is it talking about? So rather than separating elements, it connects them. Looking at this picture, where do you think the ma is?
Shadow and lights.
Yeah, that's another way to think of it, shadow and lights. Now, look at the movement, right? So our eye is traveling this way. And it's kind of stopped here for a moment. And eventually it kind of moves again, but there's a pause here. Now, Ma occupies this space. Right here. That's the key. That's where all the potential is and something kind of magical emerges. And this is very unique to Japanese, not only Japanese gardens, but Japanese traditional arts. Like, I know we have some tea experts in the audience, and with Japanese tea ceremony, it plays a big role. The pause in the movements, right? Also, are you familiar with like Chinese silk, like ink brush paintings, where it's mostly black and white, and the mountains are far in the background, but it's mostly white space. Again, it's what the artist didn't paint that is interesting. And then you take that a step further, then you notice the paper that it's used on. And then the paper becomes interesting. It's very different from Western art where, all right, we've got a canvas, for example, that's paint the whole thing. You want to forget the canvas, right? It normally doesn't play an important role. But in this case, the canvas becomes a player. So, how does this translate into pruning again? We have my friend here, Snuffleupagus. This is a common problem in Portland, Oregon, so this is a good thing. It's kind of harder to have this problem in Rockford, I think, with the heavy winter, winter snow and the cold. But yeah, the trees go like crazy. Japanese maples do in Portland. But, for example, right? You have a thing here. What does your eye do when you see that? Yeah, you look at the truck. You're exactly right. You're exactly right. You look at the garage, the truck. So yeah, okay.
I see a little monster.
You look at things
A big one.
that are separated. That's what you're looking at. You're looking at object, object, object. Then, after pruning, first you realize there's boulders under there. So already there's a conversation. And then magically there's Kisei, because I tilted the camera. Don't tell the next group. So, but the key is not thinking about Kisei, but thinking about Ma. Again, it's that idea of creating space. In this case, you could look at Ma in two ways. One, with kind of in relationship to the stones, right? They've now been revealed and there's a dialogue. But I think more importantly with this one, you're just looking at the space within the tree itself. So now you can see the branches, the movement, and it basically allows the viewer to become part of the tree, right? You know, it's that versus, I'm a truck, right? The tree holds no interest. It's very, right? It's a blob, exactly. And blobs, they can be interesting, but it's nice those lines in there to bring that out. And again, it allows the viewer into the scene. You're not separate. It's not a thing anymore. Just one more example. And again, my photography, I'm sorry, but it's normally I think kind of towards the end of the day when I take the photo and the light is so bright. I think I need to start doing black and white.
So from Snuffleupagus
Yes,
to I see the boulders.
yes.
And that looks to me like you took away like half the foliage of the tree.
I probably did.
You know, I mean, a lot.
Yeah, no, I do. Yeah, we tend to take quite a bit, especially with these Japanese maples.
Yeah.
To give you an idea, you know, say the new growth has maybe, say, 5 sets of leaves. You know, 1 set, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll cut back to sometimes just 1 or 2
Yeah.
in certain areas. Definitely more on the apex, where it's stronger on the top. But as we work our way down, we like to keep it looser, because another kind of key is it's nice to see the wind blow, right? And have that movement. You don't really want a stiff tree that just sits there. Yeah, good question. And again, here is thinking about Ma in a little different context. So this is a new garden, so it's not exactly developed how we want it, but you can see how by having an open maple, in this case, it connects you, it gives you context. What I mean is, if this was a solid blob, it wouldn't allow you to see through into the gate as you approach. It would be a separate item. But because it's opened up and airy, now when you approach, you would see through, you'd see the gate, and you'd be, okay, I want to enter this garden. So I think that's important, that it allows for interaction within its space, right? Because a blob isn't really interacting with what's around it.
So Greg, quick question there.
Yeah.
Interestingly, the gate, indicating the tree, the gate is a very volatile energy.
Yeah.
And it chose to not have the tree emanate that, but to actually have the tree punching toward it. So could you talk about that?
Yeah, that's a great point. I don't, if everyone heard, Dean, basically he's saying, so the gate it's very vertical, right? Very vertical structure, and you have a choice as a designer to kind of go against that, or work with it by creating other vertical trees next to it to emphasize it, or try something different. And kind of like you mentioned, in this case, everything is kind of greeting the guest. So everything is kind of coming out as far as the movement of the trunks and the trees. It's in a way, it's to soften that vertical, because if we did another vertical tree next to it, it would take away from maybe the power of the gate to have too many verticals. So I
It's
know.
also picking up the movement of the other ones on the other side.
Right. Very good. Yep. Right here, right?
Yep.
Yep. Good. That's a great connection. Yep. So that is dealing with the kisei, right? You've realized now, oh, there's movement there. Now, there's little other ways. We talked specifically about kind of ma within a tree, right? So just one tree, kind of thinning it out, creating holes and depth within that tree. You can also think of it in kind of a different way, a larger scale of actually in the garden. So here, just yesterday, I think it was, we were in the garden pruning, and this, again, this picture isn't the best, but this pine and this pine were very similar in height. They may be 3 or 4 feet different, not much, but it was visually, they looked about the same when you were at that space looking. And it didn't really create enough depth. It looked too confined in that location. So we did what everyone with a saw would do, take off the top.
Oh,
So that one you just saw
yeah.
is now here. And now you can see there's a big difference. And it brings in the maple that was in the background. Again, allowing space. Let's show it one more time. So I think to get the full effect, you'll have to go into the garden to see.
Don't be afraid
But
to take
the
them.
idea here, in this sense, ma, has to do with kind of the heights of things, the final height, and their interaction with each other. So not within the plant itself, but thinking about composition of final heights of the plant material. So that's another important aspect with ma. And I'll demonstrate a little bit here. So, let's see. This is much easier when it's on a tree. You know? I have to be the trunk and the branch. This is hard, but here we have a branch, right? Not very appealing, right? Why? Why isn't it appealing?
Oh, it's too full.
Too full? Yep. So there's beautiful lines you can see, but when it's like this or like that, you really don't see it, right? So a quick way would be to just kind of bend every branch on all the trees so you can see it. And I'd be out of a job, I think. So we have to reveal these lines. I need someone strong. Tim! It was either this or my next volunteer has to be a rock.
Oh, he's a rock.
All right, I'll just put you over so I don't make a mess. All right, so.
Tim, I'd be happy to hold that branch.
Yeah.
Truly.
25 minutes or so, is that all?
Yeah. Well, I think You guys ready for a coffee break?
I'd be better off standing up. You're getting
See,
close to
I
it.
picked him because his outfit. He looked kind of like a
Oh,
drunk, right? Right, so when I approach this, I basically do what I'm doing now. I walk around, kind of look, and I see, so I can see where the lines are going, right? And I can't really understand that if I'm just sitting in one space. So I always kind of approach, and then it's like, use the other hand to push down what I want to be future paths, future areas. I push down so I can see what lines I have in there. So I know right away I want to create some separation, and the easiest thing is anything kind of going down or has a weird shape, I remove. It's windy today. At least there's no bird's nest, right? So, just with some initial cuts, then that kind of, in a way, frees up my mind of like, okay, that made sense. Then I kind of accentuate what I want to happen. I cut that because normally the bottom branch, I want to extend a little longer. So everything kind of steps back as it moves up the tree for the most part. So, and that might even be too far. So something like that. I like, do you see that?
Yeah.
You have to use your imagination a bit, right? So sometimes, well, most of the time when we're pruning, we're almost thinking maybe 5 years ahead sometimes of what you want to happen. You have to think, okay, I want that movement in the future. This one's gonna fill in over time. I really like this line here, so I'm just trying to kind of accentuate that by taking out some of the weight. And then see how this one goes back, so I'd remove that. Again, these are kind of blocking the view there, and that might even be too much, so I might remove that. See, that's my bonsai tendency. I want to wire that to right there. See how that's going kind of that wrong direction? But I know in the future, I'll get more growth, so I can work with that. And then here again on the top, I would cut it back quite a bit to create that kind of top layer. You getting tired?
I just want
Okay, I'll be quick. I'm talking too much.
It's okay.
At the beginning, I promised no talking.
This man that being a tag team approach.
Yeah. The knees, I'll take that. Now, here, Tim, can you move it this way a little bit? See this? That's a real no-no in pruning, in the sense of they're crossing over, and more importantly, they're on the inside of a curve. So anything on the inside of the curve, you don't even think, you just take it out. Anything on that confined space, because there's no future for those branches. So everything you want, if it's an S curve, everything on the outside of the S curve, right? So, or like, here's a curve, everything here is good, everything here is bad. Yeah, so I think you get the gist. I think my tree is very tired, ready to go dormant very shortly. But I think that gives you the idea, right? And I might even do that for fun. You get the idea, right?
Yeah.
Thank you, Tim.
You're welcome.
Round of applause, please. I can't be prepared to. I even have wipes. You're okay? Thank you. So, we looked at two main things. We looked at Kisei and next week we'll be talking about Pa. But now the point is, right? I really, truly wish we could go out in the garden and do more of that, right? Because that, again, your body's learning. You're not thinking, you're just doing it, right? And it does take a long time. It's a slower process, but once you have it, you really have it. But what I wanted to really kind of get across tonight is the fact that these concepts of Kisei and Ma, you don't need to have this in your hand, right? To get it, or to improve your experience in a Japanese garden. Even without the pruners in your hand or actively pruning, you can now, I think, walk through a garden and be more in touch with it, right? And I think kind of, going back to the title of creating space to connect, pruning in Japanese gardens, I don't know if it makes sense or what I was trying to get at, but the idea of creating space to connect, right? So pruning, but that space, that ma, is what is really important in a Japanese garden. Hoichi Kurisu, kind of his guiding principle for him and kind of our company is that healing power that kind of is inherent in Japanese gardens and a lot of Japanese arts. And that is because of the ma in the kisei. It's being able to connect with that energy. And one kind of interesting side note is in like Latin, the Latin root for health is whole. The W-H-O-L-E, whole. And that got me thinking, ma, it's a different type of whole, but basically what it's doing is it's connecting what we maybe outside of the garden think as separate items, right? Here's a thing, here's a thing, here's a thing. Through pruning in Japanese gardens, we are trying to show you that there is no thing, right? You can't separate one thing from the other, right? I don't like cockroaches, but I think we need them somehow, for example, right? You get rid of one element, everything slowly falls apart, right? So it's that mystery and that joy of that ma that really keeps me going back into the garden over and over, right? How do I know I'm so happy today? Because maybe yesterday was a bad day, right? But if I don't experience that pain, then I wouldn't experience the joy. And I think you can see that in the space of a garden through the ma. It allows for that connection. So that's kind of all I have to say today. We will have some time for some questions, but I do have one video to show you, if I can get it to work. It's a video Koichi and I put together, kind of touching upon some of the themes that we just talked about. So please enjoy. It's a very short film, 5 minutes, so just relax. Maybe.
Unmute.
unmuted.
Triangle.
Sorry, one second.
I'll take the pruners to it.
Yeah, exactly. You can tell why I work out in the trees, right? Plays right there. Sorry, one second. We can make up what they're saying.
I don't know, listen, the sound is.
Sounds good. I've got an idea. Can we just play it through the computer?
Yeah.
I'll turn the mic up. Right, we'll start. That's the beginning? Okay. Alright. Where's the sound?
In Tokyo, somebody introduced me to Kenzo Ogata. He is my teacher. He is the one who tried to stress the Japanese people's making the peace through the nature, through the garden. Connecting nature to the human beings. That's I felt, that's my job. This company mission is our garden design is the vision of our inside lives, you know.
There's a lot of different principles that can guide Japanese gardens, not only in their creation, but also in their pruning. And one of them is called kisei, which basically means the energy of something or the movement. In cutting one tree, for example, there's 1,000 decisions you have to make, but after time and experience, you're not thinking anymore, you're not making decisions, you're just kind of interacting, having a conversation with a tree. That's the beautiful part of pruning.
What pruning culture in Japan doing is, what is the most beautiful essence express these trees? After pruning, they are talking to me. Really, they have conversation there. That should be, that's a heaven to me.
I think you know you're done when there's a balance of the tree to the space around it. I think that's the key, and that brings up another Japanese principle called ma, which is the idea of space, or in English, kind of negative space, the spacing between the branches with the surrounding building or surrounding plants. We want to create separation, but a connection as well.
The garden products which we make or prune even is not I did it. You know, try to make a nice trees or let's set the rocks biggest in the town. Or that kind of ego doesn't work. It's almost impersonal. The garden built with that and the consciousness is beyond the time. Time is not exist there. It core of the healing is impersonal, universal, based on the consciousness. Then you can call healing garden.
The truck is gone.
Very nice, thank you.
All right, so there it is. Any questions or? Yes.
I really do not know, what do you do with the nests?
What do we do?
This
with
time
it?
of the year?
Yeah,
Do
we normally kind of move to the next tree.
Yeah.
Or we come up with another good technique is sometimes we'll work on 2 different trees where we'll work on one for maybe 15 minutes and then we don't want to stress the bird out, so we go to another tree, work for a little while and then go back. So yeah, so we
Some
know
with aggressive birds too.
they can be aggressive, yes. Yeah. That's where wearing a helmet is helpful. Any other questions? Yes.
It's not a question, but I am one of those sons.
Yes.
Then I know this time of the year is a very important year, pruning, yeah? But we tend to interrupt gardener when they are in the zone, and then, oh, that's a no-no now. I will realize.
No. I can only speak for myself, but I'm sure the other gardeners feel the same, that it's interesting. So I learned in Japan, and gardening there is or how pruning is perceived in Japan is very different from America. In Japan, it's basically one of those things that I have no idea what, and then they hire a professional to do it. But in America, we want to try to do it ourselves as well. And so I think there's a lot of learning. So it's a great opportunity for us to teach the public. And I think, we enjoy talking to other things besides trees sometimes. Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about the concept of ma as it relates to a garden as an entity? Because I know that there are a lot of gardens where, well, there's a space, I could put something there. And then all of a sudden, a view that maybe has been admired for 15 years is gone.
Right.
Because somebody decided to put something there,
Right.
so.
That's a layered question. But
Okay.
I think the first kind of one way to think of a whole garden, or Japanese gardens, the intent is to kind of create that space, to create at least areas within the garden, place for people to engage with it, right? To not feel separated. That's, if I kind of jump back, Western style gardens, or for example, imagine Versailles in your mind, right? If I walked out or looked from I think it was the bedroom of the king, right? At that time, and looked out at the Versailles, I understood it, right? It was immediate. I didn't have to walk through the garden. It was just, there it is. Everything's symmetrical. So it didn't matter if you were the king, I was the king, whoever was standing there was kind of, they see the garden. But Japanese gardens, the intent is through the asymmetrical balance, and through that asymmetrical balance creating ma, it allows a viewer to really connect with the garden. Does that make sense? So I think if you walk through the garden now with that in mind, I think you'll start to see these connections. of like, oh, that's why maybe that tree with this boulder, they're talking, and there's space there, there's nothing there. That's where you enter the garden. And your second kind of question or comment, yeah, gardens change, they evolve, and I think Tim and the crew here are always thinking about this garden's getting older. Some things are getting too big, and so you always have to reevaluate. Is that tree was great for 20 years, but now is it too big? Or is that bush doesn't work here anymore? So sometimes you can resolve that issue through pruning by thinning it out, or sometimes it has to go. Yeah, but they get recycled. See, you know, I'll bring this back to Portland with me too.
For the start of the pruning, would you go start from the top, go all the way down, or does it matter?
So did you hear the question? When you start pruning a tree, do you start at the top, or does it matter where you start? Always start at the top. For one simple reason, then you only have to clean once. Right? Gravity. You get to the next pad or branch, clean that off, work your way down. The second is, by creating the apex, the top of the tree, that dictates kind of the rest of the movement, right?
Thank you.
Yep. Great questions. Anything else? If not, feel free to ask me after. Yeah.
So there's a, a worry and a tentativeness about like that, oh crap moment, I, clipped it and now the whole thing, like, the tree's not happy and I'm not happy and we're not happy. So, what, is it just a matter of like going slowly? Is it a matter of starting with small projects or?
Yeah.
You talk about it almost like muscle memory, like, right, we get it.
It
we
is,
start-
it is.
But to gain that, then, you wanna
Time.
tackle your biggest, most beautiful tree, obviously, but.
Right, yeah.
I just almost sometimes feel like I'm afraid to start because it's just.
Right.
so bad.
Yeah. I think if I were you, what I would do is, okay, say you have a tree outside your living room that you're always looking at, but you want maybe to try to add a little more kisei or ma to it. I would sit down and look at that tree for a while and study it from which locations am I viewing the tree. And then just pick out with your mind, okay, if I have a little gap here, a little space there, does that improve the look? Or is it better with that branch there? So I think in a way, start big. It doesn't mean you're gonna cut big, but start kind of big of like, what makes sense to remove?
Okay.
What sections? And I think that'll give you the confidence. And then I also sometimes just cover with my hand, the little section, like, oh, what would it look like without it? But that's kind of my advice. And then the other part, the muscle memory part, the first is more like the visual understanding. The second, I would just pick a small, something you don't care too much that's, on your neighbor's property. Sorry, on your property border somewhere, and then just kind of practice there.
But if,
Pruning the forest.
I guess the one thing I heard you say, the key thing was, think big but cut small. So when you start out, there's no reason you have to take a big chunk out. You can just start whittling back.
That's
So if you think something needs to be done, just take a little bit off. And so if you don't like that little bit that you took off, then you stop.
Yeah.
But if it's working in the right direction, and you reach, I prune a lot in my yard.
Yeah.
And I have some basic guidelines that were given to me by Tim. And it's not rocket science, but
Hey,
you do
hey,
have,
hey.
you do have to. Run into a couple rocket scientists and I'll. But you can,
Oh, yeah.
once you start removing bits,
Yeah.
you'll
Good
see
point.
more.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very good
It'll
point.
start making sense, because when you have the snuffleupagus,
Yep.
that's the, okay, where the hell do I start?
Yeah, yeah,
You
exactly.
just start somewhere,
Yeah.
and you're looking down there, you're looking inside the tree, you lay down at the bottom of the tree and look up.
Yep, yep,
Say, well, what's that structure look like, and what should it be doing?
good point.
You know, so.
In the back.
I just had a question inspired by you. When you have an artistic project, I will say it like this, sometimes, would it be correct to say, when you're looking and trying to decide where to start, or even if you're already in and you come to a point, to trust your gut? And if you trust your gut, that's a sense, having that conversation with the tree.
Yeah.
And then let's say you trust your gut and you say, you know, this is my gut saying cut this branch. So you cut it off, you go, oh my gosh, you know, but then what that really is the inspiration to look around somewhere else and try to help that what your gut said, to do another gut exercise in communication. And so that in the end, you're probably not, and some people will say, it would not be artistic beauty if what you had in your mind is exactly what you created, because then you weren't having that conversation and including the process and the tree in the creation of the end.
Good point, yeah.
Well said.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have nothing to add
So
to
you don't have
that.
to be afraid, in other words, no fear, because you can always,
Yeah.
oh, well, now there's another idea.
Yeah.
The tree said this.
Good. Well, all right. I think one more question, and if I didn't get to your questions, feel free. I can hang out a little bit after. So if I miss my flight, it's okay. Yes.
Do you guys belong to a cult by any name? So if I wanted to locate a local Japanese pruner,
I think you're sitting in the place of worship. So I think you got Anderson Gardens here, and I mean the crew, the gardeners here is a great resource, and exactly. So I think here's a good place to start, and they can send you in the right direction somewhere. So, and I did forget. I'll wrap up here, but there is a waiver if you don't mind signing on your way out, because I did teach something to your mind before your body. And I just want to make sure that you tell your body that you learned this information on the way out, if you don't mind signing that. Thank you.